Good evening, councillors, staff, ladies and gentlemen. I invite you to bow your head in prayer. Almighty God, we ask you to guide us in all of our discussions, to show goodness, honesty, understanding and wisdom in all that we undertake for the benefit of the city of Joondalup and our residents. May we respect each other's views at all times, and we ask all of this in your name. Amen. Thank you. Please be seated. Nala Kadic Wajak Murat, Khan Kardak Nijabuja. We acknowledge Noongar people as the original custodians of this land, and I hereby declare this council meeting open at 6:30 p.m. In accordance with the recording and live streaming of council meetings policy, this meeting will be video recorded and live streamed on the city's website, with the exception of confidential items and periods of adjournment as determined by the presiding member. Cameras have been positioned in such a way so as to avoid members of the public. However, by being present at this meeting, members of the public consent to the possibility that their image may be live streamed to the public, and recordings will also be made available on the city's website following the meeting. The official record of the meeting will be the written minutes kept in accordance with the Local Government Act 1995 and any relevant regulations. Members of the public gallery are also reminded that it is a requirement under the Meeting Procedures Local Law 2013 to act in a courteous and respectful manner when in the council chamber. You're asked to show respect to anyone exercising their right to ask a question of the council and or deliver a public statement. Using personal electronic recording devices to record anyone or the meeting is also prohibited under the city's local law. And I'd like to remind members of the public to show respect, please, also to city's elected members and officers during proceedings. First item of business is declarations of interest. I have a number here, first of all, from Director Humphrey for item 12.20, the CSRFF, Community Sport and Recreational Facilities Fund Club Nightlights Program. It's an interest that may affect impartiality, as Director Humphrey is a member of Whitford's Hockey Club. Declaration from myself for 12.13, list of payments made during the month of November 24. It's an interest that may affect impartiality as I work part-time for Thompson Gear, but I do not work on City of Joondalup matters. Same again for 12.14, list of payments made during the month of December 24. Also an interest that may affect impartiality as I work part-time for Thompson Gear, but do not work on City of Joondalup matters. Further one for 12.2, the State Development Assessment Unit development application for 7-storey multiple dwelling, 3 Delos Way, Sorrento. It's an interest that may affect impartiality as the Thompson Gear does work for some of the neighbouring property owners, but not for the proponent of that proposal. Finally, 12.6, confidential status of legal action reports. That is a financial interest, as I do work part-time for Thompson Gear, and they have done work for the city and do work for the city, but I do not work on matters where the city is a client. Are there any other declarations of interest, Council? Councillor Pizzi.
Just a declaration of interest for Whitford's Hockey Club, as my daughter is a member there.
Thank you. I'll just, if you can fill that form out, and our governance team will pick that up. Further declarations? Excellent. Next item of business then is deputations if you're looking at the agenda, but that was dealt with at briefing sessions. So we then move to public question time. There's a set of procedures which relates to public question time, and I'll request that you follow my direction at all times. You have an opportunity to ask 2 questions. Your questions should be directed to the chair and asked in a polite and respectful manner. Please state your name and address for the public record as per our meeting procedures local law before asking your question. As is our practice, I maintain a register and I will commence there and work my way through that register for people who've already put their name down, and time permitting, I'll offer further questions to the gallery. So first of all, Mr. David Chapman, please. Oh, please. Very, very welcome, Mr. Chapman. Please come forward to the lectern. Oh, you can bring your papers as well if that makes it. Thank you.
I'm sorry, it's a little early in the piece, so at this stage I was going to have questions, if relevant, with regards to Delos Way. All I can do at this point is register my opposition to the development.
Sorry, so do you have a question for Delos Way?
Not at this stage. We would need to cover it in the notes at this stage, so it's a little early. Apologies.
There won't be another opportunity for questions?
In that case, no.
Okay, no, thank you. Thank you. Mr. Travis Meart.
Travis Mear, 26 Drayton Greenway, Kingsley. My questions relate to the investigation by the City regarding the noise wall along Twickenham Drive. Would the City consider assisting with some noise monitoring and data collection at the City's residents over a period of time that could be relevant for an acoustic consultant to analyse at a later date?
Thank you, Mr Meart. Director Lee.
Thank you, through you, Mr Mayor. When the City's typical approach to dealing with noise concerns or noise complaints is to install some noise monitoring equipment for at the property where the noise complaints are originating from, with landowner consent, obviously. We then take those measurements and then assess those measurements against the noise regulations. This is a little bit of a different situation in terms of the noise that is coming from the Mitchell Freeway, given that the noise regs actually exempt transport noise. But what we could do in this instance, and quite happy to give some consideration to it as part of the report we're preparing, is to potentially install some noise monitoring equipment with landowner consent at properties to take those measurements. I guess that would be for the purpose of collecting information and data rather than being able to relate it to compliance or otherwise with the noise regulations. But as I said, quite happy to give some consideration to that and build that into the report that we're preparing.
Okay, thanks.
Second question, Mr Meart.
My second question is, who would be the appropriate contact to organise that, and what time frame would we be looking at for that to be installed?
Director Lee.
Thank you, through you, Mr Mayor. The most appropriate contact would probably come through myself, so the Planning and Community Development Directorate. Within that directorate, it's our environmental health officers that are responsible for managing and maintaining our noise equipment. I probably can't give you a time frame at the moment. It would probably be something that we would just have to look at and consider. We have some noise monitoring equipment, but it does get deployed and may actually be in use at the moment, so we just need to confirm when we'd be able to do that. But certainly through my office, we'd be able to follow that up with you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr Meart. Mrs Lorraine Schroeder.
Lorraine Schroeder, Hobie Place, Ocean Reef. My questions are in regard to the dog management guidelines. Can the Council confirm that the purpose of the City's dog management guidelines is to mitigate risks posed by aggressive dogs and to prevent dog attacks in order to protect public health and safety?
Director.
Thank you, through you, Mr Mayor. I'd have to take the question on notice just because I don't have the guidelines in front of me this evening, so I wouldn't want to misquote them. But certainly what you've described, I would imagine is the primary thrust of the guidelines. But as I said, I will take that question on notice so I can be sure I'm accurate in my answer.
Thank you.
Do you have a second question?
Given that the dog management guidelines specifically address potential threats to residents' health, well-being and safety, does the Council acknowledge that it has a role in safeguarding the community from risks that could cause harm?
Director Lee.
Thank you, through you, Mr Mayor. I think it would be most appropriate to take that question on notice as well, and so I can provide a response to both in relation to the dog management guidelines. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mrs Schroeder. Julie Foley.
Good evening, sir. Julie Foley from number 21 Seawood Loop in Sorrento. My question, number one, it's been noted that traffic counting or monitoring has been in place, and I'm not aware if they are for the council or for the developer. This said, does the council have any plans, should the said development go ahead, to propose road management or blocking of Delos Way to restrict flow of traffic onto Seawood?
Director Lee.
Thank you, through you, Mr Mayor. I'm happy to answer in the first instance, and if the Director of Infrastructure Services has anything further to add, he's welcome to do so. Through the assessment that we received for Delos Way, the traffic reporting prepared was undertaken on behalf of the applicant. So it was a proponent-led traffic report. That's not unusual. What the city does do when it receives that is we do review the report and verify whether or not we're comfortable with the modelling and the assumption that has been built into that report. Sometimes it's not a case that the final report that's available for the community's consideration or even council's consideration this evening is what the original report is as lodged. If there are issues that we have with the assumptions or modelling, that is updated until we arrive at a point that we are comfortable or there's nothing further that the applicant can revise to satisfy us. In this particular instance, the traffic reporting that has been prepared is demonstrating that there is sufficient capacity in the local network to accommodate the scale of the development. And so I would not expect there to be any intent to close Delos Way or make any changes to the local road network. But as I said, I will just ask Director of Infrastructure Services if there's anything further to add.
Director Klassen.
Through you, Mr Mayor, nothing further to add at this stage, no.
Thank you. Do you have a second question?
Yes, I do. It's understood that there are caveats relative to building in the area. Can the council impose those caveats on the developers to ensure they adhere to the height, proposed good amenity and minimise visual impacts upon the current residents?
Thank you. Director Lee.
Thank you. Through you, Mr Mayor. I'm not, or the city is not aware of any caveats that would obligate the developer from complying with the building height that's stated in the local structure plan. What we're bound by in terms of undertaking an assessment is the planning framework rather than whether or not there's a caveat requiring adherence to design guidelines, which is the more typical application of caveats. In this instance, the applicable planning framework, being the Hillary structure plan, does set a height for the site of 3 stories. That's obviously not what the developer is proposing. In considering the scale that has been suggested, though, we did take into account the potential impact for surrounding landowners, as well as the way the proposed development fits in context with that surrounding area. And as per the officer's recommendation, it's not something we're supportive of.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mayor.
Thanks, Rob. Mr. Fritz Nabel.
Hi there, my name's Fritz Nabel. I live at 12 Seawood Loop in Sorrento. I do have 2 questions. The first one relates to traffic management. The roads in the area are just coping with existing traffic, let alone any existing additional vehicles with the new development. I have read the consultant's report on traffic management, and in some extracts of their report, they've used apartment structures with 1, 2 and 3 bedroom, and then other reports, these have different numbers again. So I'd like to know, the question is, if the roads are presently just coping with the additional traffic that's coming through Seawood Loop and other areas, how is the council and the developers going to overcome these issues? And simply, we have vehicles parked on one side of the road, we have vehicle parked on the other side of the road, which only allows one vehicle to come through, so vehicles travelling opposite directions really have to give way to each other. Presently.
I'll bring you to we've got a lot of questions. You said, how is the council and the developer going to overcome these? Just to make clear, the council is making a recommendation. The council's not the decision maker here. But Director Lee, in terms of the primary question.
Sorry, can I just ask?
No, I'm going to go to the director. We do have statement time after this. Thank you. Director Lee.
Thank you, through you, Mr Mayor. As mentioned earlier, the city has reviewed the the traffic impact statement that's prepared and is broadly comfortable with its findings. There was one issue that we did have concern with, which was in relation to the potential for vehicles queuing to access Hepburn Avenue, and given the proximity of the proposed crossover for the development and the potential for conflict with sightlines for vehicles exiting off Levanzo Way. What has been discussed with the applicant is to relocate that crossover further south, so away from Levanzo Way and Hepburn Avenue, to resolve that. Whilst the city's not supportive of the proposal, one of the recommendations is that if the West Australian Planning Commission, who is the decision maker, is of a mind to support the application, we would want to see that crossover moved to resolve that outstanding concern of ours. In relation to the query about cars parking on opposite sides of the road to that sort of restricts two-way movement, that would be managed independent of the planning approval. There are obligations under other legislation that a vehicle owner is obligated to adhere to. That may be managed through the city's local laws, but it may also be an issue that's a police matter because it's in relation to the Road or Traffic Act.
Thank you. Do you have a second question?
This probably follows through from the first one. There was a camera, 3 cameras located on the corner of Dallas and Seawood Loop. Was that instigated by the City of Joondalup or the developers? And was it by the City of Joondalup? Is it part of your follow-up on traffic management? Because it only stayed up for 1 or 2 days, and for whatever reasons, if traffic management was being considered, surely that would be retained for a minimum of 14 days.
Thanks. Director Lee?
Thank you. Through you, Mr Mayor. I would have to take the question on notice just to confirm whether it was one of our cameras or not. The city has 3 mobile CCTV cameras that we do deploy across the city. That's typically in response to community safety initiatives rather than monitoring traffic impacts or flows. I'm not sure off the top of my head if that was one of our cameras that we deployed. So as I said, happy to take the question on notice and provide a response once I've been able to consult with the team.
Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Carsten Kraut. Thank you. Mr. Marcus Humphreys.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. Marcus Humphreys, 45 Seawood Loop, in relation to the 3 Delos Way development. Just a single question. What is the city considering as far as the aesthetic appeal of the proposed development, particularly in terms of 2 aspects, the bulk and size of the proposed development, and also the potential shadowing that may occur? In particular, the overall view of how it will change the skyline in that specific area. Sorry, there's probably a few questions there, Mr Mayor, and I do apologise for the loaded...
No, it's a question that really has to be answered in 2 parts. There's what is the planning officer's opinion of the aesthetic appeal, and then there's what is the councillors and the council's opinion. The councillors and the council will have their chance to comment on that later in the meeting, but in terms of the professional planning officer's opinions on the design, I'll refer to Director Lee.
Thank you, Mr Mayor.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. Through you. In relation to the height and scale of the development, in summary, the city is not supportive of what is proposed. Our view is that it's inconsistent with the intended local character of the area, and that's defined largely by the Hillary's local structure plan, which suggests a 3-storey development for the site is more appropriate, and then also giving consideration to what is already established in the surrounding area, which is primarily single detached housing, 1 to 2 stories in size. In relation to overshadowing, that was given some consideration in terms of how it impacts the skyline. What the city has recommended to the West Australian Planning Commission as part of their consideration and assessment is that more work needs to be done to understand what the potential impact on views of significance are, given the size of the development. In terms of overshadowing, there's a very prescribed way in which planning assessments can consider overshadowing. It's based on the shadow cast at the winter solstice. When we did undertake that assessment, it did sit within the threshold or the extent of shadow that could be cast, largely in part to the fact that this bulk of the building has been situated on the northern side of the site, plus also there's a road separating the site and the southern properties.
Council, I propose a procedural motion that question time be extended for a period of 10 minutes. Seconded Councillor Kingston by show of hands. Those in favour? Thank you. Declare that carried. Our next question is Mrs. Narelle de Groot.
My name is Marcella de Groot and the address is number 20 Millboy Drive in Warwick. Good evening, Mayor and Council. My questions relate to the residential parking permits near Warwick train station. Has the City of Joondalup performed an analysis from the perspective of the ratepayer? And if so, can the information be made available?
Thank you. Big night for Director Lee. Director Lee.
Thank you, through you, Mr. Mayor. May I clarify through you, Mr. Mayor, in terms of what analysis you're referring to?
If there's a benefit to the residents in order to change the current parking system?
Director.
Thank you, through you, Mr. Mayor. The city did give consideration to what benefits there would be to the residents in terms of shifting from a paper-based system to a digital one. One of the key ones, and I accept that this isn't a view shared by everyone based on some of the feedback that we've received, is one of the key premises behind the e-permit system is that it will make the ability for a resident to manage their permits more convenient. It allows them to do it in their own time. It also means that they won't be required anymore to know where their physical permit is, and there won't be a requirement to pass that physical permit to their visitors. So there has been some consideration given to what the benefits would be for residents in terms of transitioning from a paper-based system to an e-permit one.
Second question.
My second question is, why has the City of Joondalup not consulted with the affected residents prior to the transition, as the permit system was set up in 2008 at the request of the residents to manage the overflow parking in the streets?
Director Lee.
Thank you, through you, Mr. Mayor. The transition to e-permits is part of a broader integrated parking and compliance management system that the city is rolling out. That has been a project that's been underway for a couple of years now. The first stage of that was to basically adopt an integrated system, which the city has now, and then shift our parking meters in our city centre and upgrade those, which occurred toward the end of last year. And as I said, this has been this is part of the second phase of that broader project to shift from, as I said, a paper-based system to a digital one.
Thank you. Mr. Steve Smallwood.
Steve Smallwood, 8 Millport Drive in Warwick. I wish to follow on from the prior speaker's question in relation to the parking permits applicable in restricted areas in general, not just Warwick. The imposition of a smartphone-based app is not going to be easily managed by many of the older, more senior residents and ratepayers in the city of Joondalup. In light of that, would the council consider continuing the existing paper permit system for those older residents who will never, I would suggest, be able to negotiate the smartphone app?
So you might have seen, Mr Smallwood, there's a notice of motion before council later this evening, and indeed Director Lee and his team have already postponed the implementation to the end of next month. And indeed, irrespective of the outcome of the notice of motion tonight, this is something that the council will be discussing in its strategic sessions next week ahead of next month's meeting. So the council is looking at different options and how to go forward.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you. Are there any other questions? If not, that concludes public question time and we proceed to public statement time. There's a set of procedures which relates to public statement time, and I request that you follow my direction at all times. You're able to make a statement for up to 2 minutes, and your statement should be directed to the chair and be polite and respectful. No question or discussion will occur at the end of your statement, and I'd ask that you please come forward and state your name and address for the public record before making your statement. And also noting there's a number of people who I think I haven't seen previously in council meetings. We quite strictly enforce that 2 minutes for the statement, so please do be aware. I will commence with the register, as I did for question time, but there'll be an opportunity for a couple, maybe more, to make statements after the register if others wish to. So I call forward first Mrs. Marion Clements.
My name is Marion Clements. I live at 14 Edmonton Place in Kingsley. Good evening, Mr Mayor, councillors. Thank you for the opportunity to speak. Some of you may have seen the news article last Friday on Channel 7 about the noise wall along Twickenham Drive. And you would have, if you had have seen that, you would have known that it's had a severe impact on the lives of people around that area. I can speak personally of how it's affected me. The noise is there morning, noon and night. It gets to a very loud volume at times. It means that I can't enjoy my garden anymore. I have to, go inside the house and close the windows and doors, and that's not what living in Australia is all about. It's about being able to enjoy your outside area. I didn't ask for this wall, but it's changed my life, and I can't, enjoy my home as I used to. The main roads are conducting a sound survey in May, and I requested if I could be included in this, and I was refused. So they will have their own places where they'll survey, and I'm sure that they'll pick places that are not terribly impacted by it, and at the end of their survey they'll say nothing to see here. So I'm very happy to see that or hear that there may be a solution to that. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Mr. Dave Thompson.
Dave Thompson, 3 Edmonton Place, Kingsley. Good evening, Honourable Mayor, Jacob and councillors. I wanted to bring up to your attention to an issue that is negatively affecting thousands of Joondalup City residents. For over 3 years, residents have dealt with invasive works adjacent to the Mitchell Freeway. It could be noted that residents would generally be happy to deal with short-term infrastructure disruption for a better standard of living long-term. However, this is not the case with the noise wall along the Mitchell Freeway, as it is not effectively shielding noise. And as highlighted in Channel 7's news story last Friday night, it's left many residents, including myself, in a state of constant stress, unable to escape elevated noise levels in our own homes. Further to this, records have been obtained from Main Roads indicating that noise assessments carried out over 2 years prior by Lloyd George Acoustics were relied upon for key wall design modifications, despite not meeting Main Road's own operating standards, which requires noise monitoring to be conducted within 2 years of reports. Whereas qualifying reports carried out by another contractor, WSP, while undoubtedly more thorough in methodology, were ignored. By Main Road's own admission, they note the lack of transparency to the city's residents by stating, and I quote, "If a member of the public gets hold of the WSP report and compares it with the LGA report, there are a number of changes in noise wall heights where more than half the noise walls have been lowered by a metre. Main Roads will be using Lloyd George Acoustics to carry out post-construction monitoring in May 2025. We believe this to be a conflict of interest for LGA and Main Roads, as their 22 report used out-of-date test data to substantiate the revised and ineffective noise wall design. In fairness to ratepayers and those enduring the excess noise pollution, we believe that engaging a fully independent and reputable acoustic consultant is the only way to create the accountability that residents seek, while ensuring that the test methodologies are held to a standard.
Thank you, Mr Thompson.
Thank you very much, sir.
Mrs Lorraine Schroeder.
So Lorraine Schroeder, Hobie Place, Ocean Reef. My statement is in regard to community health, the residents' community health. The City of Joondalup dog management guidelines clearly acknowledge that dogs can pose a potential threat to public health, safety and well-being, as well as to native wildlife. These risks are not addressed under the local law, but instead through specific council guidelines clearly demonstrating the city's responsibility for managing threats to community safety. By implementing these guidelines, the council has acknowledged its role in protecting residents from potential harm. This sets a clear precedent that public health concerns, particularly those related to risks and safety, fall within its remit. Given this, we urge the council to consider its duty beyond dog-related risks. With mounting evidence that the COVID vaccine has caused injuries and, in some cases, even fatalities, residents deserve the same level of protection and decisive action from the city. The claim that health matters are not within the council's remit is inconsistent with its own approach to dog management, which is explicitly about public safety and well-being. Both dog attacks and vaccine-related injuries have demonstrable risks, yet only one has been addressed by council policy. If the council recognises its responsibility for health and safety in one case, it simply cannot dismiss concerns in another where harm has been established. We ask the city to act in the best interests of its residents and acknowledge the need for action regarding vaccine-related injuries. Thank you.
Thank you. Dr. John Irwin? Is that correct? Thank you, sir.
John Irvin, 78 Seaward Loop, Sorrento. Evenings, Mr Mayor and councillors. Before I say anything, I must point out I have aphasia and I apologise in advance if I don't get the words quite right, okay? This is regarding 30 Dillondi Way, the development everyone's spoken about tonight. I just want to add one thing. I have 7 grandchildren, and many of my neighbours in that street also have young children. My youngest grandchild is 5. Most of the people in that street are concerned about the massive increase in traffic that will occur if this development does go ahead, and I'm very pleased that the council is not supportive of it. And I just hope that you are able to also add my little comment about the children, because I see lots of children running across the road there, and the traffic is going to be so great that we might end up losing a child, and that would be tragic. And thank you for letting me have my say.
Thank you, Mr Irwin. Does anybody else wish to make a statement? If not, I declare public statement time closed. Next item of business is apologies and leaves of absence. I have two apologies for tonight's meeting from Councillor Hamilton Prime and also Councillor John Raftis. We also have a number of requests for a leave of absence, which you should see on the screens before you. Are there any other requests for a leave of absence? If not, then I seek a mover for the motion before us. Moved Councillor Jones, seconded Councillor May. By a show of hands, those in favour? Against? Declare that carried unanimously. Thank you. Next item of business is the confirmation of minutes. We have before us two. So you'll see a recommendation there that the minutes of the following meetings be confirmed as a true and correct record, being the ordinary council meeting from the 10th of December and the special meeting of council held on the 18th of February. Moved Councillor Jones, seconded Councillor Hutton. Is there any question or discussion on the minutes? If not, I will put that motion hopefully on the screens and ask you to vote. Thank you. Declare the voting closed and that item is carried. Next item of business is announcements of the presiding member without discussion. Joondalup Festival returns in 2025, beginning Saturday, March the 15th and running through to Saturday, April the 5th. In a Western Australian first, 3 15-metre water dragons will take over Hillary's Boat Harbour from Wednesday through to Sunday throughout the festival, fresh from wowing crowds at Lunar New Year celebrations in Melbourne. The water dragons are expected to draw large numbers to Hillary's Boat Harbour, with their performances accompanied by an epic soundscape and light show. As well as this free, immersive experience for all ages, this year's festival offers a range of free and low-priced experiences that celebrate the city's unique cultural identity, including coming back to our CBD in a big way. Joondalup Festival is supported by major partners, the State Government via Tourism WA, Lottery West, Hillary's Boat Harbour and the Department of Transport, and I encourage all residents to check out the Joondalup Festival website for the full program. Further upgrades are now underway on the city's coastal shared path in a 3.7 kilometre stretch from Mullaloo to Hillary's Boat Harbour. The existing 3 metre wide path will be replaced with an improved 4 metre wide red asphalt path. City data indicates that 8,300 people walk, wheel or ride along the coastal shared path in Mullaloo each week, while around 5,500 use the path weekly through Whitford Snodes Park in Hillary's. The path will enhance safety, connectivity and accessibility, as well as delivering a better overall user experience for locals and the many visitors to this stunning section of our city. These upgrades have been funded by the Department of Transport WA Bicycle Network grant funding program as part of the State Government's Hillary's Cycle Network expansion. Finally, the city's native plant giveaway is returning for 2025, proudly co-funded by Water Corporation's WaterWise greening scheme and part of the city's ambition to be a leading WaterWise community. Eligible residents can apply for a free pack of 5 native WaterWise plants to support the creation of wildlife-friendly gardens and contribute to a greener, cooler community. Native plant stock is limited and expressions of interest can be submitted online from Tuesday, March the 4th through to Friday, March the 14th. And for more details about this initiative, please visit the City of Joondalup website. Next item of business is identification of matters for which the meeting may be closed to the public. There are 3, being item 12.6, status of legal action reports, 12.23, electricity supply agreement, and also 12.4.1, walk of fame. I'm proposing a procedural motion, Council, that in accordance with clause 14.1 of the Meeting Procedures Local Law, that we suspend the operation of clause 4.3, order of business, to enable consideration of those 3 confidential items to be discussed after motions of which previous notice has been given. So moved. I have a seconder, seconded Deputy Mayor. Just for the benefit of residents in the gallery, what that are essentially doing here is taking all the confidential items and putting them to the very end of the agenda. So if there's an item that you're here for, we discuss that first rather than closing the doors and asking you to leave. I'll put that motion and ask you all to cast your votes on the screens before you. Declare the voting closed and that item is carried. Next item of business is petitions. We do have before us a couple of petitions, one in relation to the use of a property on Midlothian Crescent, Kinross, being used as a holiday rental, and another petition in relation to the Megiddo Way, Duncraig footpath upgrade, which is also subject of a notice of motion later this evening. Are there any other petitions? If not, I seek a mover for these two notices of motion. Moved Deputy Mayor, seconded Councillor Vinciulo. Any question or discussion on the petitions? Deputy Mayor.
Yes, thanks through you, Mr. Mayor. If I may, I have questions regarding 11.1. I can see that the subject property is registered under the WA State Government Short-Term Rental Accommodation Register. I also understand that if the property is rented for more than 90 days, a development approval is required. Please can the City clarify if a development approval has been initiated, and if so, what is the current status? Thank you.
Director Lee.
Thank you through you, Mr. Mayor. Up until very recently, a development application or a planning approval didn't exist for the property to be used as short-term rental accommodation. Late last week, following a compliance investigation undertaken by the City, an application was lodged to seek approval to use the property for short-term rental accommodation. It has only been with the City for a couple of days, and so an assessment hasn't commenced yet, but one will do shortly. As part of our assessment, there will be community consultation undertaken, and so we will be providing an opportunity for nearby residents to provide feedback on the proposal ahead of us making a decision.
Thank you. One more question, if I may, through you, Mr. Mayor. Does the development approval require that an inspection of the property takes place by City officers? Thank you.
Director.
Thank you through you, Mr. Mayor. Not every application we receive requires an inspection to be undertaken. There are instances where we do. I know as part of our compliance investigation, we have inspected the property to inform us, at least to trigger the need for an application. It's probably a little bit early at this stage for us to be able to confirm one way or the other whether or not we'd need to go out on site as part of this application that's just come in.
Thank you. I will put that motion and ask you to cast your votes on the screens before you. Declare the voting closed, and that item is carried. We now come to the reports section of the agenda. As is our practice, I'll make my way around the room and give elected members the opportunity to withdraw items. I'll start with Councillor Vinciulo this month.
12.2, thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Chester.
Nothing this evening, Mr. Mayor, thank you.
Thank you. Councillor O'Neill.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Just 16.1.
Yep. Councillor Fishwick.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. 12.3 if the ward member doesn't take it out, and also 12.4, which will be behind closed doors. Thank you.
Thank you. Deputy Mayor.
None, thanks, Mr. Mayor.
Councillor Hutton.
At 12.8.
Thank you. Councillor Kingston.
Thank you. 12.10, which is the corporate business plan. And Mr. Mayor, I hope that you withdraw 12.21, so the mid-year budget, as I've got an amendment for that. And then I'm hoping somebody will also withdraw 12.23, the energy supply agreement. And I'll do that if nobody else wishes to.
We'll pull that in confidential, so it'll be withdrawn anyway.
That's all right. That's all.
Thank you. Councillor Jones.
None, thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you. Councillor May.
12.3.
Yes. I will give Councillor May the call on that one. Councillor Fishwick is the proponent, and Councillor Pizzey.
12.22 as well, please.
Yep. Thank you. 12.2 then. State Development Assessment Unit Development Application for 7-storey multiple dwelling, 3 Delos Way. Councillor Vinciulo. Do you wish to move the recommendation?
Yes, please.
Thank you. Do I have a seconder for that? I'm happy to second. Oh, I think I'd prefer Councillor Fishwick to second. Thank you, Councillor Fishwick. Councillor Vinciulo.
Thank you, through you. As the councillor for the South West Ward, I strongly oppose the proposed 7-storey development at 3 Delos Way, Sorrento, due to its excessive size, height, and inconsistency with the established local planning framework. We've heard a lot about traffic and safety, and those concerns also remain incredibly paramount to our residents. Given the proposed increased density, residents are very concerned about severe congestion on Delos Way, Seawood Loop, and access points onto Hepburn Avenue. Additionally, the potential for vehicles queuing to access Hepburn Avenue and conflicts with sightlines must be addressed, particularly if the crossover into Delos Way is not relocated further south. There are major concerns. Most local residents accept that the site would be developed, but they have purchased, they have built, and they have invested in high-quality standalone properties with the expectation that any development would align with the planning principles outlined in the Hillary Structure Plan number 20. This proposal, however, grossly exceeds those expectations by attempting to introduce a high-rise structure that does not reflect the intended local character. The HSP has long designated this area as Sorrento Small Lot Residential with an R50 zoning, which does not support high-density apartment-style developments of this magnitude. The legal provisions clearly indicate that development in this precinct should consist of a single residential dwellings, duplexes, group dwellings and townhouses, ensuring a consistent built form that respects the existing community fabric. The proposed 7-storey structure disregards these guidelines by more than doubling the anticipated height limit and increasing the residential density far beyond what the community was led to expect. While the proponents may argue that housing diversity is necessary, this development does not meet the intended objectives for the precinct and represents a significant departure from the carefully considered town planning principles that have guided this area's development for decades. We all know this is not an isolated case. The city has recently been subject to scrutiny from state bodies over a structure plan or lack of, with the submission of a controversial development submission in Warwick. Yet, here we are again, facing another concerning proposal. In this case, we have a clear and long-standing structure plan for Hillary's, a plan decades old. One must question the value of local structure plans if developments so far removed from them can advance this far in the process. If these plans can be so easily disregarded, it raises fundamental concerns about the integrity of our local planning framework and the ability of the community to have confidence in the rules that are supposed to guide development. The other concern is precedent. I think this is an important factor. The precedent moving forward. If the WAPC and the SDAU was to override the Hillary Structure Plan number 20, what does that mean for the future of our local planning policies? What will it mean for the other side of Whitfords Avenue with the next site on Martinique Mews and Hillary's? Ignoring the Hillary's structure plan on this scale simply distances the local community, council and city from having a meaningful say in developments that directly impact our residents. The local Sorrento residents are not opposed to development, but they rightly expect that any new proposal should respect the planning framework and the community character that attracted them to the area in the first place. The city must advocate strongly to ensure pro-sensible development, a development that aligns with a long-standing local structure plan. I implore Council this evening to emphatically support the city's recommendations. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Vincula. Councillor Fish, we can't, please, I can't allow that. Thank you. Councillor Fishwick.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. After careful consideration, I firmly believe that this proposal is inappropriate for the site and should not be supported. The most significant issue with this proposal is the excessive height and scale of the development, which is inconsistent with the intended local character of the area as set out in the Hillary Structure Plan. The existing character of Sorrento and surrounding suburbs is defined by a low medium density built form, which this proposal fundamentally contradicts. The scale of development is more suited to a high density urban centre and not a coastal residential precinct like Sorrento. It's crucial for planning decisions align with the strategic vision for the area, and this proposal clearly does not meet that standard. The residential design codes establish fundamental design principles regarding building height, site area, and the overall impact of the development on its surroundings. This application fails to satisfy these principles in several ways. Firstly, building height. The proposed 7-storey height significantly exceeds what is appropriate for this locality. Such a development would dominate the streetscape and negatively impact on the visual amenity of the area. Secondly, site area and density. The scale of the proposal does not reflect the intended residential density for this part of Sorrento, leading to concerns regarding overdevelopment and the strain on existing infrastructure. Also, under clause 67 of the deemed provisions of the planning and development regulations, several factors must be considered when assessing a development application. This proposal fails to meet key provisions, including the development does not align with the applicable structure plan, which clearly outlines the desired built form and the density for the locality. The proposal is not compatible with the setting and does not integrate harmoniously with the existing urban fabric. The impact on the local amenity is unacceptable, as the scale and bulk of the development would result in overshadowing, loss of privacy and increased traffic congestion. And also, the preservation of local character and the built environment is paramount, and this development will undermine the established area identity. In relation to traffic and parking concerns, the proposed development includes a single vehicle access point from Delos Way and provides 145 resident car bays, 12 visitor bays and 16 motorcycle bays. While this may appear adequate, the reality is that an 83 dwelling development of the scale will generate significant additional traffic, for which the local road network is not designed to accommodate this level of intensification, raising concerns about congestion and road safety. Furthermore, while the development proposes an additional 8 on-street parking bays, this does not significantly or sufficiently mitigate the impact of increased demand for visitor and overflow parking in an already constrained area. In conclusion, given the development's inconsistency with the local character, its failure to align with the Hillary structure plan, and its non-compliance with key planning provisions, I cannot support this proposal. Our responsibility is to ensure that development enhances and respects the existing community fabric rather than imposing inappropriate high-density built form in low-density residential areas. I also therefore urge the West Australian Planning Commission and the State Development Assessment Unit to reject this application when it comes before them in the interest of preserving the unique character and livability of Sorrento. Thank you, Mr Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Fishwick. Further comments, councillors? Deputy Mayor.
Yes, thanks through you, Mr Mayor. I echo the points raised by South West Ward Councillor Venturo, and I support the recommendation before us. Thank you.
Thank you. Further comments? Councillor Kingston? Councillor Fishwick, could you switch off your microphone? Thank you. Councillor Kingston.
Thank you. Just briefly, yes, I support the officer's recommendation that this proposal is not supported as it goes to the SDAU. Although, looking at this, my biggest concern is not so much even the scale of the development, which I don't agree with the structure plan being originally 3 stories and this being a proposal of 7. My biggest concern actually goes to how the planning system has been changed over the last couple of years to set up the SDAU and the way, in my opinion, that's struck out democratic participation in this, is that if this is approved, the concern is, of course, over the road, there's a site which is likely to be developed, and that may set a precedent. That may also be 7 or an 8-storey development application. Over the road on the Hillary's Boat Harbour side, there's in the master plan, as most people are aware, a 4 to 6-storey hotel which is also being proposed in that document. So it seems to be this area has had people's eye on it for a while to increase the density significantly, and it appears that the state government through their planning approvals processes has been supporting it. Just down the road with the Aura development, that was a similar situation to this one, and it also went to the SDAU, where that was then approved at 8 stories, which was also significantly in excess of the height limits at that location. So my concern going forward with this is with the SDAU, to my knowledge, it has never actually refused an application that's been put to it. Maybe there's been one or two, but when I looked into it, when we dealt with the Warwick Quarter development, where there was 1,000 extra dwellings being proposed in Warwick, I couldn't find a refusal. So this system was created a number of years ago, supposedly, to stimulate the housing market, which everyone knows is running very hot. But it's been a system which has been supported by both the Liberal Party and the Labor Party. They set up this system, and I checked the votes in Parliament, and the previous opposition leader, Zach Kirkup, did not vote against the creation of this unit. This significant development assessment unit, it overrides and has significant capacity to override the planning system, the local planning frameworks, and the local planning schemes, which are set up through democratic participation and working with the community about what types of densities are appropriate in what locations and what heights are appropriate. And through those sorts of processes, that's how the structure plan arrived at its height limit of 3 stories. And of course, now the developer has, and it is their right because the law permits them, has applied to the SDAU to seek a discretion in excess of those limits. But this is a system that hasn't just come about by accident. It's been set up to create a stimulus in the housing market and to stimulate development. And so the concern going forward is that I think it's looking at this and looking at the Aura development that was down the road, I think it is my assessment, not to prejudge what the SDA will do, but that it's likely that this will land up with an approval from the SDAU. This isn't the council's decision. We're just making a recommendation tonight. So then I guess the question is, if that eventuates, what's to be done? So I would just say from tonight, I think the community needs to take 2 thoughts from this, 2 or 3 thoughts, that firstly, they should speak to the candidates in the current state election, the Liberal side and the Labor side, about whether they support having this assessment unit, which is being used to circumvent democratic participation, whether they will, if their party is elected, remove the SDAU. And secondly, which is probably more pertinent to the residents here as well, the Planning and Development Act also contains a power for the government of the day to be able to cancel or amend an approval that's given by the SDAU. And I think the public should take away asking their candidates, Liberal and Labor, whether their party would commit to that, whether they would commit to, if the SDAU approves this in a couple of months' time when they have their meeting and makes a decision, whether they individually as the party candidate for Sorrento, whether they will step up and say, we don't think this is appropriate, this is inconsistent with the height and inconsistent with what's at this location. So I fully support the officer's comments and the comments from Councillor Vinciulo. I just think the public needs to be very cognizant that there is a chance that this will be approved, and if it is approved, what opportunities are open to them. And so I think take those 2 points, ask your candidates whether they will remove the SDAU, and secondly, whether their party will commit to cancelling the approval. Thank you.
Thank you. Further comments? Councillor Chester.
Yes, thank you, Mr Mayor. I do have a question, if you allow. Could the Director possibly comment on the potential strength and purpose of Recommendation 3, which effectively is asking the State Development Assessment Unit to determine any potential impact on views of significance? Thank you.
Director Lee.
Thank you, through you, Mr Mayor. When it comes to views of significance, they become relevant to a planning assessment when a judgment decision or discretion is required to be exercised by the decision maker around building height. And so, put quite simply, in this instance, the Hillary structure plan sets a height of 3 stories for development of this site. The proposal is 7 stories, and so through the planning assessment process, there needs to be some consideration as to whether or not it's appropriate to approve a height that's greater than 3 stories, so 7 stories in this case. The criteria, or some of the criteria that's used to guide that decision, relates to the access of views of significance. when the city tried to apply its discretion to that particular element of the proposal, we felt as though there wasn't a sufficient enough amount of information to allow us to carry out that assessment completely. So that's really the thrust behind recommendation 3, is that prior to a decision being made, that the SDAU consider and determine whether or not there is an impact on views of significance, and whether or not it's therefore appropriate to support the additional height that's being proposed. So really what it's trying to achieve is that the SDAU needs to obtain some more information and satisfy itself as to whether or not that height is having an impact on views of significance before they make their recommendation through to the WAPC.
Yes, just further, I presume the thrust of that recommendation is to put the SDAU, making them, being brought to account effectively and justifying the increase in height. So I commend the recommendation and its purpose.
Thank you. Councillor O'Neill.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I make it no secret that a man's land is his and he should be able to do with it as he sees fit in terms of, developing it or improving it or renovating it. That being said, in this instance, I do believe that there is a little bit of backhanded under the table work there by using the SDAU to try and push through something that is a blatant attempt to build something which I would consider in this area a monstrosity. It's not warranted. They have attempted to get this through using the SDAU with no pushback from residents, which obviously they are getting that pushback and it's due. I do believe that something can be done with it, but I don't believe that something of this magnitude is warranted, especially in an area like that. It's going to do nothing for the infrastructure. It's going to put strain on the infrastructure. The residents that live in that area will have to live with that. I see the SDAU as something that people are using for backhanded tactics and under the table, trying to avoid the scrutiny of council, trying to avoid the scrutiny of the residents. It's very clear that the residents don't want this in this area. It's been very clear that they have not met the criteria and the checks and balances that would be in place otherwise, and would see this as a rejected application. So I commend everyone for standing up against this. I commend the administration for coming up with this and not supporting it, and I will not be supporting the development of this either. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Pizzey.
Just a quick question. If the council agree to your recommendation tonight and the SDAU do approve this development, what avenue do the residents have to reverse the decision? Are there any avenues they can take?
Only judicial review in the Supreme Court.
That's it, thank you.
Thank you. Councillor May.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I echo the comments made by Councillor Vinciullo and others. I'd also, from a different perspective, we know that the scale of a development is not fit for its location, but it poses a larger question as to the areas that are fit for that kind of development are not getting that kind of development. If we look at Joondalup CBD, if we look at areas close to train stations or right near train stations, and even Hillary's Marina itself, which could handle more residential at a reasonable height. It does pose the question why developers seem to be trying to circumvent local governments and go through this process to put development in locations where people don't want development, in areas that aren't designed for that level of development, when there are areas with land available that are designed and would benefit from that kind of density and population increase. But obviously I support the recommendation. I commend Director Lee and his team for putting it together. I think it's quite comprehensive and it's quite powerful to send to the WAPC. Thank you.
Thank you. Question,
It's a
Councillor
question.
Kingston? Question?
Thank you. The question is a very simple one, and it goes to the briefing notes. It says here that Clause 171 of the Planning and Development Act allows the Governor to amend or cancel the approval. Can their residents ask their local state members of Parliament to ask their political parties to cancel or amend the approval under that section of the Act?
No, the Governor acts on advice of Executive Council, not local members of Parliament.
Can I follow up on a question?
Yes.
The Executive Council is the ministers of the government of the day, that is correct?
Yes, but they are separate from members of Parliament.
Can the local residents ask their local members to make representations to the ministers for this purpose of cancelling the approval? So can their local member ask the ministers?
They can ask. Yeah, I get what you're getting at, Councillor Kingston. It's just not the way it works. Yep, thanks. Further comments? Just a quick comment from me, and I made a similar comment when the Warwick item came up. Right from the outset, Joondalup City Council welcomes development investment, and actually wants to incentivise more high-rise residential dwelling in the city of Joondalup. We recognise that Perth can't keep expanding infinitely into the biodiversity hotspot that we are located in. We recognise that we are growing as a Perth metropolitan area, and that infill and medium rise and high rise will form part of our future. That is why we have set out for years now to first of all incentivise it in the Joondalup CBD. And I actively go out and advocate for investment in high-rise development in the Joondalup CBD. Joondalup Council's made decisions for many years to actively incentivise high-rise development in the Joondalup CBD, which is unusual compared to a lot of other councils. We have set development areas where we are incentivising this kind of development. Now, I recognise that there's an attraction for coastal development, particularly coastal medium rise. That's why this council has, for years, actively advocated for and achieved a coastal medium rise development just down the road at Ocean Reef. Ocean Reef suits it quite well for the height limits that apply there. Not saying it should go over those, but it is very different to this location. It's built into a landform which from memory is as high as 50 metres to the road from the high water mark. That's why we identified that landform. And if I bring us closer to home here at Sorrento, and I'm sure residents who are present and councillors know well, we had our first SDAUA application in the Aura development, which this council spent years of engagement with local residents on a structure plan or on a framework for that site, which I think from memory, Director Lee, was 5 to 6 stories. Is that correct?
Thank you, through you, Mr Mayor. Yes, the structure plan that has been approved by the WAPC has a graduating height, but it tops out at 6 stories.
Thanks. Yeah, that's what I thought, that's the Aura development down the road. Now, when that one came through, that's been pushed up to 8 through this process. Here we have one going from 3 to 7, which is considerably more again. I just have to say, as someone who's been part of that process for many years, and I've supported Joondalup being actively pro-development and actively supporting medium rise and high rise, and we have done the work about where we want to locate it in our community. We've lost a lot of bark along the way. That Aura development structure plan site, that was not an easy discussion to have. Ocean Reef Marina has not been an easy discussion to have. And we've gone out and we've led, and now we end up in this situation, which is quite difficult. I guess I'm just framing that as a council that has sought to be pro-development, but yet still finds its approach being circumvented potentially with this proposal. And for that reason, I strongly support the recommendation as moved by Councillor Vinciulo as a recommendation to the SDAU. We have sought to honestly and openly create expectations for medium and high rise at different points around our city. One just down the road from this site for 5 to 6 stories, similar height at Ocean Reef, so 2 coastal development nodes, and uncapped height limits at Joondalup CBD. I support developments in those areas, but here we have residents who bought on a very clear understanding of a 3-storey limit, and they have an application which significantly exceeds that. And I understand those concerns, and for that reason, I support the recommendation. Thank you. Further comments? Councillor Vinciulo, do you wish to close?
Yes, thank you. Just briefly. Just would like to thank everybody's participation in the conversation. It's evident there's an issue that needs to be resolved, and my only hope is that the SDAU is going to take this matter incredibly seriously. I want to also thank the city for the body of work they've done. It's greatly appreciated, and I know the residents of Sorrento and the surrounding areas are also grateful. And finally, I would like to thank the residents that have taken the time to reach out to me and express their concerns, and especially the ones in attendance this evening. Thank you.
Thank you. I'll put that motion and ask you to cast your votes. Declare the voting closed and the motion is carried unanimously. Thank you. Next item of business is item 12.3, beach umbrellas. Councillor May.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. I move the officer's recommendation.
Thank you. So moved. I have a seconder. Seconded. Councillor Pizzey. Councillor May.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. As elected members will recall, back in late 2023, I moved a notice of motion that is spelled out on page 47 of a report. The reason for bringing this motion to council initially was I had been asked by people around being able to hire things and at beaches because they either don't want to have to bring their car if they live locally, but don't want to also walk there and then have to lug down umbrellas or small tent or other items. And the other thing that people had suggested was, which wasn't specifically mentioned in a notice of motion, was mobile saunas at certain beaches as well. But I didn't specifically mention that because my understanding was that the city could consider that on a case-by-case basis anyway. From my own personal perspective, as someone who has lived for most of their life within walking distance, but not quite walking distance enough to be bothered walking to the beach and then having to drive to my local beach being Mullaloo, but also down to Sorrento where I often run, is those two beaches are at capacity with parking throughout most of the year when people use the beaches. And even in winter, they can get quite busy too. There's not really any capacity to further expand parking at these locations unless we encroach into public open space, which no one wants to do, and or build a multi-storey car park, which no one would want either, understandably. These two beaches that come to mind are Sorrento and Mullaloo. They attract people from outside of the city of Joondalup. They also attract people from outside of the country who come there as tourists. These people won't have things in their possession, such as beach umbrellas or other things that will allow them to stay at the beach for longer and then move on to another location to spend money and just hire an umbrella for $10 or whatever it's going to be. Yet they also may not recognise, especially many people I know who have moved here from Ireland or the UK, that Australia, from memory, is the #1 country for melanoma per capita in the world. It causes a lot of deaths, and so they don't necessarily think to be sun smart either. And that is why I did seek support from the Cancer Council for the City of Joondalup proposing this initiative as we will encourage sun smart behaviour. I'll just make a comment. When I first put the motion up, it did take a life of its own, which is fine. There was a suggestion that we would be closing off sections of beach for private use and things like that, when I was simply, the intent of the motion was looking at someone wanting to hire a small umbrella around 1.5 metres to take with them to the beach if they wanted to sit on the beach and read a book or something. And as someone who's not really a lay on the beach kind of person, I generally sit there for about 10 minutes and get too hot and want to leave. But if I had some form of shade, I'd probably enjoy it a lot longer and I wouldn't get sunburned. So that was the intent behind the motion. And also the other intent was the City of Joondalup would send a signal to operators that we are open to their ideas and we're open to supporting them operating with such initiatives. And another initiative which may be of use is portable beach lockers, where people like me, I will often go for a run along the coast, and then if I've driven to the beach, I will then have to put my stuff in my car and get changed and go for a dip, or vice versa. If I've decided to ride to the beach or walk to the beach, I don't have anywhere to store my belongings. If I want to go for a run along a beautiful new shared path and then go for a dip, or grab a coffee and have a change of clothes or change of shoes, I can't do that. So there's lots of different ideas, and it's not really aimed at sectioning off sections of beach or for private uses. I saw somewhere. It's more about giving people more convenience, and not really, if you don't want to hire anything or use a locker or whatever it is, then you don't have to. It won't make any difference. So that was the intent behind the motion. I understand there's one or two alternates being floated, and I'm happy to listen to those as well. But otherwise, I encourage elected members to support the recommendation. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Pizzey?
My understanding of this proposal is that it will be community-led, so if the community want something like this on their beach, then they will pay to have the service, and if they don't, then the business won't work and it won't be there. So I don't think there's a concern of how this affects community, because if it's not something that is wanted or required, then it won't function at a business level. And the fact that it is not going to require private beach access, which I would not agree with, I don't have an issue with allowing this. Thank you.
Thank you. Further comments? Councillor Fishwick?
Thank you, Mr Mayor. The provision of beach equipment for hire, including seating, umbrellas and related leisure equipment, has the potential to enhance the visitor experience for beachgoers, active local beaches and support local tourism and economic activity. Expanding the mobile traders permits to include the option for operators to provide beach equipment for hire is a practical approach that leverages existing city processes while ensuring accessibility and community enjoyment. While not opposing the concept of beach equipment hire, it is essential to address an important public health concern related to sun exposure here. Many tourists, particularly those from overseas, may not be fully aware of the risks associated with exposure to the sun's ultraviolet UV rays. Notwithstanding the comment made about umbrellas providing protection from the sun, there is a common misconception that beach umbrellas provide adequate protection from UV radiation, which can cause skin cancer. And as a volunteer with the Cancer Council, who spoke on dangers of skin cancer, I would like to highlight findings from a study published in the journal Photochemical and Photobiological Sciences. The study examined the level of sun protection provided by beach umbrellas and found that, on average, a large beach umbrella provides sun protection factor SPF of only 7 at best, and in some cases as low as an SPF 3. For context, the American Academy of Dermatology recommends SPF of 30 for adequate protection against harmful effects of UV rays, and furthermore, umbrellas do not provide protection from UV radiation reflected off surfaces such as our white sands. This means that individuals relying solely on an umbrella for sun protection may still be at significant risk of UV exposure, potentially leading to sunburn and the increased risk of skin cancer. In the light of these concerns, while supporting the initiative to enhance beach experiences through equipment hire, it is recommended that additional measures be considered as part of the risk management considerations that were contained in the report, such as information signage on hire locations to educate beachgoers about UV risks, encouraging the use of additional sun protection measures, including sunscreen, hats, sunglasses and UV protective clothing, and collaborating with health organisations to promote sun safety awareness. By integrating these considerations, the City can ensure that beach equipment hire services contribute positively to tourism and recreation, whilst also promoting public health and safety. So I would ask that the City's administration takes the issue of public health and safety on board with potential beach equipment hire operators. Thank you, Mr Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Fishwick. Councillor Chester?
Yes, thank you, Mr Mayor. Question and a comment, if I can. I noticed that an extra recommendation was requested, and I'm looking at page 12 of the briefing notes. And I also noticed that the city staff are not supporting it. I presume what the city had in mind, and this is the question, the assumption is made that once we change the rules, a provider will spontaneously take up the opportunity and see this as a business opportunity. I agree with that. I won't support the additional recommendation. I don't think an expression of interest is necessary at this point, and I agree with what the city is implying, that a business operator will see it as an opportunity and do it spontaneously without the expression of interest. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Chester. Deputy Mayor?
Yes, thanks. Probably a question through you, Mr Mayor. Can I just check, this potential policy has had quite a bit of publicity. How many potential operators have contacted the city to express interest in providing this service? Thank you.
Director.
Thank you. Through you, Mr Mayor. We haven't received any proactive approaches in relation to a commercial operator taking up this initiative.
Follow-up question, if I may, through you, Mr Mayor. So if an operator wanted to provide these services, does that require this council resolution to be in effect in order to do that? Thank you.
Director.
Thank you. Through you, Mr Mayor. No, there is existing processes and capacity for a commercial operator to take this up. It doesn't necessarily need the resolution or the recommendation provided by the officers. With the exception of if it was a mobile trader that we currently have that wanted to expand the uses or services that they currently offer.
Thanks. And a final question, if I may, through you, Mr Mayor. Just if this recommendation is passed tonight, is there any significant cost on the city for implementing that? Thank you.
Director.
Thank you. Through you, Mr Mayor. I don't believe there would be a significant cost based on the recommendation. If Council does support the officer recommendation to, for example, approve the expansion of the permitted uses for mobile traders, we'd likely do a little bit of promotion to our mobile traders to make them aware of it, but I wouldn't think that would come at a significant cost to the city.
Okay, I'll make a comment if I may, through you, Mr Mayor. So we've established that there wouldn't be significant cost. We've established that it's not really necessary to do it, but given that there's minimal cost, I have no problem supporting it, but I do note there's appears to be very little interest in any providers offering this service. Thank you.
Thank you. Did you have a question?
Could we please have 1 and 3 done en bloc and 4 separately? Thank you.
4 hasn't been moved as of this stage yet. 4 has not been moved. But thank you, Councillor Chester. Thank you. Further comments? Councillor May, do you wish to close?
Thank you, Mr Mayor. Don't really have anything further to add. I appreciate Councillor Fishwick's information. I wasn't aware of that, so I will be extra cautious in future. I suppose it might depend on what the umbrellas are made of, but very interesting to hear. And I think the signage is a good idea regardless of what happens to this motion. Because a lot of people probably aren't aware of the best and smart practices. Thank you, and I encourage everyone to support the motion.
Thank you, Councillor May. I'll put that motion and ask you to cast your votes. Declare the voting closed and the item is carried. Thank you. Next item of business tonight is noting that 12.4 will be done as a confidential item, 12.6 will be done as a confidential item. So we come to item 12.8, minutes of regional council meetings. Councillor Hutton.
Thank you. I'm guessing I need to move the recommendation.
Need to move first, if you're happy to move.
Yeah, I'm happy to.
Do I have a seconder? Seconded Councillor Kingston. Councillor Hutton.
Yeah, thank you very much. I just wanted to bring the council's attention to the minutes from the Catalina Regional Council meeting. I know I did ask a question at the briefing session. The answer to that question has been provided to us all, but I just wanted to make sure everyone's attention was brought to it. In effect, at the meeting, there was an agenda item. Now, this agenda item was basically exploring the relationship between the Catalina Regional Council and the Mindarie Regional Council. Now, the agenda item basically came up following a community forum that took place in the city of Joondalup. Catalina Regional Council effectively acknowledged the impact that the operations of Mindarie Regional Council were having on the residents of the Catalina estate. Now, through this process, Catalina Regional Council effectively updated its contracts. Now, the contracts are obviously signed when individuals purchase land at Catalina. Part of those updates was just to make sure that people purchasing land were aware of the TIP, were aware of its operations, and were aware of the potential impacts. But additional to that, I managed to move a alternate recommendation, which also included an advocacy position. Now, the advocacy position taken by Catalina Regional Council is to request the Mindarie Regional Council investigate options to expedite the closure of Joondalup landfill in a timely and orderly manner. Now, I guess in part of the notes for the meeting, it basically states that the reason for moving this was just to make the position of Catalina Regional Council super clear, and the position of Catalina Regional Council is that the early closure of the landfill is the preference. Now, that position aligns exactly with the decision made by the City of Joondalup Council on the 22nd of October 2024. So for all intents and purposes, Catalina Regional Council and the Joondalup Council have taken the exact same advocacy position on the expediting the closure of the landfill in a timely and orderly manner. Now, for our community, I obviously think that is a good outcome, and I hope that Mindarie Regional Council responds appropriately and takes all steps necessary to make that request come to light in the benefit of local residents.
Thank you, Councillor Hutton. Councillor Kingston.
Thank you. I just have a question to the director, who's the liaison officer to Catalina, if that's all right. Whoever that is. I think that's Director Carson. No? Director Humphrey. Thank you. Is the City of Joondalup aware to what degree people who are purchasing properties within the Catalina Regional Council estate areas, that they are fully informed about risks associated with the TIP?
Director.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Responding through you. My understanding, but I will take the question on notice and confirm, my understanding is that when a property is sold, there is a notification placed on the title about the operation of the refuse facility nearby. So owners or potential owners would be very aware of the operation of the waste facility. But I'll take that on notice so I can provide confirmation.
Thank you. Councillor.
Thank you. And following on to that, in addition to any notifications on the title, is any information given to any prospective buyers? So there may be a clause now in the contract that says, well, you acknowledge this, but are they given full information about any concerns about air quality or odour?
Director.
Through Mr. Mayor, I'll take the question on notice and follow up with Catalina Regional Council administration in the morning and provide the information to elected members.
Thank you.
Further comments? Councillor Hutton, wish to close?
Yeah, I will just briefly close. I look forward to hearing the advice provided, and I will leave it to administration to provide that update. But obviously, this agenda item that was passed was basically to achieve the exact outcomes that Councillor Kingston has asked in his questions. And you know, I think Catalina Regional Council really takes this issue seriously, and there is a focus on making sure that as much information as possible is provided to local residents. But obviously, having a timely and orderly closure of the site will be in the best interest of all residents, and I think that's the important to be the focus here. But yeah, I will leave it to the administration to answer those questions. But I think Catalina Regional Council is really taking some steps in the right direction here, and hopefully Mindarie Regional Council responds accordingly.
Thank you. I'll put that motion and ask you to cast your votes on your screens. Declare voting closed, and the item is carried. Item 12.10, Corporate Business Plan 24 to 28, Quarter 2 Report. Councillor Kingston.
Thank you. Could I move the officer's recommendation as written?
So moved. I have a seconder for that. Seconded Councillor Vinciulo. Councillor Kingston.
Thank you. I don't wish to speak to it.
Thank you. Councillor Vinciulo.
Reserve all right, thank you.
Further comments? I'll put that motion then and ask you to cast your votes. Declare the voting closed and the item's carried. Next item on the agenda is 12.21, the mid-year review. Councillor Kingston.
I think you're moving the mid-year review.
I typically do, but were you going to?
Oh, is this an alternate?
The
or
alternate.
an amendment? Okay, yes, that's right. I'll move it as an alternate.
Thank you. Happy to second. Councillor Kingston.
Thank you. Yes, so this alternate is nearly exactly the same as the officer's recommendation. There is an additional point 2, which says that the council is to reaffirm the decision that we took in December in relation to the Heathridge Park master plan project. If everyone casts their mind back to the December meeting, the councillors will recall that the club presented and that there's been a number of concerns that have been raised about the facilities there, the quality of the facilities, especially that the football club has been using. And it's about time that a definitive action is taken to move this project forward. So that is what the council decided in December. This reaffirms that decision and says that yes, the council is serious about taking this action. And so with the advocacy which is currently occurring with the state and local elections, this shows our counterparts at those levels that this is a project the council is serious about, and we'd like to have discussions going forward. I'll respond to any further comments.
Thank you. I'll just speak to it very briefly as seconder. It's slightly unusual to do this, but it's timing related. So essentially all we're doing is reaffirming the council's commitment to this project. It's a project the council has been working on for many years. Now, we only revise our capital works program once a year. That's coming up in a few months, and we lock it in for the year ahead, and we work through that program accordingly. It has always been the Joondalup Council's intention to include this project. It's the last of our district facilities that has not received an upgrade, but as you all know, and it came to the December council meeting, we were doing public consultation, which saw phenomenal level of support for the proposal. And so now is the time to say, yep, we're going to lock this in and go forward with it. I wasn't there at the December meeting, but I've noted very clearly the advocacy priority that the council has put on this project. The CEO and I have been acting accordingly with that priority, and I ask that you support this alternate because it helps to underline the importance of this project as we talk to state and indeed federal campaigns, and we've discussed this with federal candidates and federal ministers. In fact, I discussed it directly with the Leader of the Opposition in Canberra in line with the council's priority, and reinforcing that prioritisation assists in the work that we're doing, and I think just underlines this has always been our intent. We are looking to do this, but we respected the community consultation process first, which we've done, and that's now been finalised, and the new Capital Works program is only a few months away for its finalisation. Deputy Mayor?
Yes, thanks. Question, if I may. Could I just check what the officer's comment is regarding this point 2? Thank you.
Director?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, the additional point can be supported.
And a follow-up question, if I may, just noting that there are other significant projects on the horizon. Does this establish more of a priority on this project as to some of the other projects that may have been scheduled to take place roughly at the same time? Thank you.
Director.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, no, it wouldn't place a higher priority over projects that have been approved by Council. It's reinforcing the approval that Council has previously given for this project.
Thank you. Further comments? Councillor Kingston, do you wish to close?
No, thank you.
I'll put that motion and ask you to cast your votes. Declare the voting closed and the item is carried. Thank you. Next is item 12.22, Councillor Pizzey, petition requesting upgrade of Triton Place play space. Councillor Pizzey.
Just a few questions to confirm that as discussions...
Sorry, Councillor, I just need you to move the recommendation and are you happy to move?
Yes, happy to move. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor May, second. Councillor Pizzey.
Okay. I just want to ask a few questions to confirm that when we're talking about not supporting the upgrade of the play space right now, that the BMX track for upgrading the city is committed to doing that in 25-26.
Director Klassen.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. And through you, currently, as indicated in point 3 of the recommendation, it's currently listed for design in 25-26, and it's subject to the approval of council of the budget for 25-26. If there is no change, that will proceed according to plan.
Councillor.
Thank you.
Councillor May.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Just one question. Is there the ability to sweat the asset, so to speak, of the playground until the commencement of construction of the upgraded bike track?
Director.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, not able to confirm that. However, that is something we can look at as part of the construction process, see how long we can keep that in place until that is the bike track's upgraded.
Yep. Thank you. Just a brief comment. I generally speaking, reluctant to rationalise assets, even though we can see on the map that falls well within the catchment of free local parks would have well, I know Callaroo Park has a very new play space. Obviously, that's across quite a busy road, but to people in the area, they won't really appreciate that. That's why I asked a question around if a new or improved asset is being put there, then it makes sense at that time to then remove the old asset, which, to be fair, isn't being used. And obviously, there's already some bike jumps there where the city's looking to rejuvenate and improve. I'd also flag that there's probably a desire to see a small skills track as well for the little kids to use as well. So then the parks can still offer something, and then other things like play spaces are offered in surrounding parks. And that also means that Triton Park, which is a small park, is an attraction, becomes an attraction in its own right for that activity, and in the other parks for playground activity, which is generally only really appropriate for kids under probably 10 or under 12 years old anyway, whereas the bike tracks can cater for kids from toddler age up to teenagers and even adults. So thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Further comments? Councillor Kingston.
Thank you. Just a short question, which is if the council supports the officer's recommendation, can I confirm that the officer's report will be given to the lead petitioner? Just so they can see the rationale and especially the diagram on page 150.
Director.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, yes, what we will do is we will provide the lead petitioner with council's decision and refer them also to the report. Just to confirm also, the lead petitioner has been informed that this report will be considered, and a link was provided to the agenda of the briefing session and the process explained to the lead petitioner.
Thank you.
Further comments? Councillor Pizzey, do you wish to close?
Just briefly, thank you. So I would be supportive of what Councillor May was discussing of maintaining the playground, if possible, until the new track can be built. That will facilitate younger community members that may not be appropriate, that it may not be appropriate for them to use the proposed Tronia Park track. It's a great spot for this type of facility for younger people with the kindy across the road and the shopping precinct nearby. Thank you.
Thank you. I'll put that motion and ask you to cast your votes. Declare the voting closed and the motion is carried. Councillors, I'm proposing an exception resolution that we move item 12.1, 12.5, 12.7, 12.11, 12.12, 12.13, 12.14, 12.15, 12.16, 12.17, 12.18, 12.19 and 12.20. And 12.9. Moved Councillor Jones, seconded Councillor Vinciulo. Thank you. Do you have that motion up on the screen? – 12.18 as well, and 12.9. Yes, that appears correct. Do I have a mover for that motion? Moved Councillor Jones, seconded Councillor Vinciulo. I'll just get the full wording up on the screen. I'll take the mover and seconder. I can read it. That pursuant to clause 4.83, (4.8) 3. Of the Meeting Procedures Local Law 2013, adoption by exception resolution, that Council by exception resolution, Council adopts the following items. Thank you. Just perfect. Thank you. I'll put that motion and ask you to cast your votes on the screens. Declare the voting closed and those items are carried. Next item of business is the reports of the CEO, of which there is none. Urgent business, of which there is none. Notices of motion, of which previous notice has been given. Notice of motion 1, residential parking permits. Councillor O'Neill.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'd like to move the notice of motion with the alternate adjustment as discussed previously to 2 years.
Thank you. Seconded Councillor Hutton. Councillor O'Neill.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. This notice of motion is quite a simple one. It comes from contact from many of the residents within the area, and it's in relation to the transfer from the paper permit system over to an e-permit system. This notice of motion is to allow the transition period for the residents that are having problems with this, and at the same time allow council to work out a way that everyone can use the systems. They've been met with the new digitalised version of the parking permit system. There is a few facts about it that need to be looked at, and there is quite a few bugs to be worked out in the system that has been adopted and implemented so far. My first notice of this was from some of the residents who reached out to me saying that they have just been moved over to an electronic permit system and that there would be no more paper permit parking for them. When I met with some of the residents, they advised me that there has now been an extension on the time that was given, as it was a bit of a, jump out of the box thing for a lot of the residents, and they were met with this complex system. It has been extended a few times there, but after talking with a lot of the residents and the problems that they still seem to have, especially when it comes to using electronic permit systems, it's clear that there needs to be something done for the residents for this. A lot of the ageing residents can't use the new systems due to the lack of accessibility of technology. Many of the residents don't want to use the new system as it can appear daunting and frightening. It is a frightening system for somebody that doesn't use technology or someone that's not familiar with the systems there, which is why this has been brought forward again, so that it gives that time for council to work out a way that this can integrate slowly and with consideration to the people that aren't tech savvy, predominantly people that don't use technology the way that a lot of us do, or the older residents who don't have access to that technology or have problems using that technology. The ones that do interact with these technologies on occasion, they can, navigate it from time to time, and if somebody's showing them the system, then they can actually do it, but after a couple of days they may forget it. I do have first-hand knowledge of this, being that my mother's 77 years old, and I can teach her one thing on the iPad, and then 2 days later I have to teach her the same thing all over again. I have troubles with the implementation of the system as well. From looking at some of the residents, the way they have to sign up, there is an identification check, and this identification check is sourced by an external party, which forces these people, if they do want to use the systems, to hand over their identity checks to a system that they don't know of. So I've brought this to council so that we can obviously work out some of the bugs and the kinks. Originally, I did have stated on here for 7 years for a period, but I do believe that after a couple of years, we will be making some serious headway into ironing out these bugs in the system, and there won't be much more need for a dual system at that stage. But it has been brought to council. The residents have voiced their opinions in mass. I've heard some of the councillors say they have been contacted. I've heard a lot of the residents' reports on this, so I won't go on too much more about it. I just would encourage council to support this notice of motion. It gives us time to look at it. There is a report being prepared which is being brought to council to look over in March, and I am aware of that. This basically solidifies it for all the residents that we are actually doing something for it. We have heard their voices, and we are going to work out something that works well for everyone. The people that can use the technology, the people who won't use the technology, and the people that can't use the technology. Thank you. I'll leave it at that.
Thank you. Councillor Hutton.
I'll reserve my right.
Thank you. Deputy Mayor.
Thank you. Through you, Mr. Mayor, I have a question. Can I just clarify how many residences currently use permits in the North Ward and how many in other wards? Thank you.
Director Lee.
Thank you. Through you, Mr. Mayor. Residential parking permits are issued for discrete areas throughout the city. So our city centre is the primary one, but then there are areas around Currumbine Station, Warwick Station on both Duncraig and Warwick side, as well as Whitford Station in a patch of Woodvale. In terms of the total number of eligible properties, there's 2,570 properties, broken down: city centre 1,749, around Currumbine Station there are 100 properties, around Warwick Station on both Duncraig and Warwick together that's 550 properties, and then in proximity to Whitford Station there's 171 eligible properties. Not all properties take up a permit, and not all properties that do take up a permit use the maximum number they're eligible for.
Thank you. A follow-up question, if I may, through you, Mr. Mayor. I think Councillor O'Neill made mention of the deadline being extended a few times. To my knowledge, it's only been extended once. Could you clarify, please, any extensions to the date for implementation of the e-permit system?
Director.
Thank you, through you, Mr. Mayor. The original deadline that was set was for the end of January 2025. We have extended that time frame out once to the end of March at this stage.
Thank you. Also, Councillor O'Neill made reference to some current bugs in the system. Please, could you clarify if there are any bugs in the system? Thank you.
Director.
Thank you. Through you, Mr. Mayor. Our understanding is the system is functioning as intended. We do receive feedback on how it is functioning and what improvements there could be. There are opportunities for us to make enhancements along the way, and that's something that we do take into consideration and will implement as we can. But my understanding is to this time the system is functioning as it's intended to, notwithstanding the feedback that there's ways on how it could be improved.
Thank you. Councillor, if I may continue with questions through you, Mr. Mayor, Councillor O'Neill also referenced a report under preparation and coming to Council in March. Could you please elaborate on that report, please?
Director Lee.
Thank you, through you, Mr. Mayor. The report that's currently drafted is intended to be presented to elected members at the March strategy session. The undertaking that I provided in relation to the content of that report would be the history of residential parking permits more broadly. So take the elected members on a bit of a journey since it came into operation in 2008, but then also focus on the transition to e-permits specifically as well.
Thank you. Another question, if I may, through you, Mr. Mayor. Councillor O'Neill also made reference to concerns about data privacy, and I wonder if the Director could make some comments to alleviate any concerns in that matter. Thank you.
Director.
Thank you, through you, Mr. Mayor. Through the tendering process for our integrated parking and compliance management system, which this forms a component of, we procured a parking system under licensing agreements, which is standard with most technology solutions. The operator that we've entered into a partnership with hosts and configures the permit website, but it doesn't manage or own the data. All the data remains the confidential property of the city, and we manage that data internally. And also I should point out, before finalising the contract with the provider, which is Easy Park, the city conducted a data privacy and system security check to confirm that all data is securely stored and managed in compliance with legal and industry best practice, and there are measures in place to prevent loss, unauthorised access and misuse.
Deputy Mayor.
Yes, thank you. I have some comments, if I may. So from the figures presented by the Director, it seems like approximately 75% of the affected residences are in North Ward. Myself and Councillor Hutton got a great deal of inquiries over Christmas period and January, and we did liaise closely with the city to address the concerns that were raised and identify methods for alleviating those concerns and modifying the system to match the concerns. So with regard to aged people who either don't have a computer or don't have the ability to confidently use a computer, noting that the permit parking only applies effectively during business hours, the city has a dedicated phone line or a phone line so that a resident who requires assistance can simply call that number, and then a city employee will be able to make any changes to the e-permit of that resident just by taking verbal instruction and confirmation of identity. There's also been some discussion about carers and casual visits by tradies, and just today I've had a further meeting with Director Lee to discuss those options, and I can say that the city's working through the issues, and we do have until the end of March for the implementation date as it stands. And I do have confidence from those discussions that the city will be fully ready to implement the system with those tweaks to address the concerns that have been raised by residents. The vast majority of outstanding concerns from residents, to my mind, simply relate to a preference to have a paper system rather than a digital system. And there are reasons that, and I know there have been issues with the paper system historically. So I'm confident that we can proceed with the existing deadline, and we can assist our ratepayers that use these permits to overcome any fears, concerns or difficulties they may have. So thank you.
Thank you. Further comments? Councillor Vinciulo.
Thank you, through you. For me, this seems to be centred more around education, and I'd like to get the city's take on what potential education could be presented to those that Councillor O'Neill was suggesting is struggling with the technology. Because if we can work on a better education outcome, we could potentially move forward. So I guess my question is, from an education perspective, is there anything that we're rolling out or any initiatives that could improve this outcome?
Thank you. Director.
Thank you, through you, Mr. Mayor. We were mindful of some of the concern and feedback that we would have in transitioning from a paper-based system to a digital one. In terms of I suppose it's a combination of education and support. So the support that we have been providing has been intended to both assist residents with a transition, but also educate them on how to use the system. So we've approached it through a number of ways. One of the approaches that we've had, which has proven to be quite successful, is we've had a number of drop-in sessions where we set up a space in our Joondalup library and promote that, and it provides the opportunity for residents to visit and basically go through the process with a number of our officers. We've held that at various times in the day and in the week, so during business hours, but also in the evening and also on weekends, to provide opportunities for all residents to come in that may have limited availability. We do have staff that are available on the telephone during business hours, which, as was pointed out, which is when the permits are in operation, so we can provide one-to-one support and assistance to residents in that fashion that aren't able to attend a drop-in session. We also have a dedicated staff member available at our administration, our main administration building currently, that can provide that direct one-to-one support that people would prefer to have a face-to-face interaction. We also have online support, so we have a series of frequently asked questions that we are constantly updating as we receive more feedback and additional queries. We've also developed and uploaded 2 short videos that residents can view, that sort of, I guess, gives them a visual instruction guide on how to use the system. As was also referenced as well, one of the things that we're particularly mindful of is a number of the residents that have contacted us with feedback have expressed concern on how they can support their carers continuing to coming to their property. There's a few different ways that we're approaching that. So for our larger care providers in the region, we're establishing a carer's permit. So that permit would be managed and implemented by the care agency, so that relieves the resident of the responsibility of having to manage that permit on behalf of the carer. But we're also aware that not all care provided is provided by the the large agencies, and some are more specialised or individual care providers. We're looking at developing some specific resources that residents can have in their house that would allow a carer to quickly sign in to the system, the portal, and basically switch their licence registration on to one of the available permits. That's something that we are close to finalising, and that's something I intend to present to elected members when we have the strategy session in March.
Thank you. Just one more question. So based on the potential education initiatives and support structures that the city has currently implemented and potentially adopting, can I ask the city, do they believe a further 2 years is excessive for a transition period?
Director.
Excuse me. Thank you, through you, Mr. Mayor. I probably can't comment at the moment as to whether or not a particular time frame is excessive or not. That's certainly something that the city would consider if the notice of motion is carried this evening. I suppose what I can say is the city had an intent to transition the system across, as it currently stands, to March. I believe with a protracted transition time frame, it almost protracts I guess by design it protracts the transition, which means that the city will be carrying a dual system, if you like, for longer. And I guess some of the issues with that is what the operational considerations and impacts that would be of running with a dual system for that period of time. But as I said, I would give more consideration to the time frame in responding to the notice of motion if it's carried this evening.
Thank you. Further comments? Councillor Hutton, seconder.
Thank you. Just some questions to begin with. Through you, Mayor. First question, what were the main drivers of making this transition from paper permits to e-permits?
Director Lee.
Thank you, through you, Mr. Mayor. As mentioned, it was part of our integrated parking and management and compliance system project, but I suppose the rationale for e-permits can be summarised by a few different points. So I touched on earlier this evening, the intent behind them is to provide a more convenient system for residents insofar as they will be able to apply for and self-manage their parking permits at their own convenience, and there will no longer be the requirement to physically display a permit or keep track of where those physical permits are. We believe we'll achieve a higher rate of compliance with an e-permit system. It's been an interesting experience as we've been supporting residents with their transition. Some of the feedback we've had anecdotally is that in the past the paper-based permit system had been used in a fashion where people were photocopying the permits, and so essentially having more permits than what they were eligible for. The e-permit system doesn't really allow that to take place. There'll certainly be efficiency and speed gained from an e-permit system in terms of the way the cities patrol these areas. It'll enable officers to patrol areas and use licence plate recognition technology rather than having to patrol the areas on foot, and in turn that comes with what we believe will be an increased level of service. So we'll either be able to undertake more patrols of the same area, or it also creates capacity for our officers to attend to other tasks. There will be cost savings, we believe, with an e-permit system, in part because we won't need to produce physical permits anymore, but it's more about the operational and labour costs that are attached to a paper-based system compared to an e-permit system. There will in turn also be an environmental impact because we'll reduce the use of paper and physical resources, and there's also an opportunity for the e-permit system to more readily gather data that'll allow us to analyse and assist us in future decision makings when it comes to our management of parking.
Councillor.
Yeah, thank you. Just touching on a few of those points. Firstly, cost. What is the expected saving for ratepayers by making the transition from paper permits to e-permits?
Director.
Thank you, through you, Mr Mayor. We're estimating the annual operational cost saving in the order of $110,000 a year. That's predominantly attributed to wages and labour costs.
Yeah. Now, I was going to ask you about the breakdown, but we'll get to that. In terms of the practical implications of this motion being passed, obviously you've flagged that there's a report coming to a strategy session of council in March. Assuming the administration is going to know when this report's coming to council, if hypothetically the report's not coming to council till April to May to June, is there going to be a process where the administration are going to notify local residents so that they're not sort of sitting on a cliff waiting on a final transition date?
Director.
Thank you, through you, Mr Mayor. The way that the notice of motion has been worded as such, it states that paper residential permits will remain in effect until council has considered and made a resolution in relation to the report. So my interpretation of that and how I would respond to that part of the notice of motion if it's carried is that once we do proceed and present a report to the March strategy, depending on the feedback from that and the pace at which we could turn around a council report, there may need to be an extension provided if we're unable to reach the March council meeting. Based on the timeframes we have at the moment, if we were to present a report to the March council round, it may be in a fashion that wouldn't necessarily allow it to go through briefing session. That's obviously something we'd need to give further consideration to. But in short, to your question, if we weren't able to have council make a decision on the notice of motion ahead of the current time frame that's been set, we would be advising residents of that and providing them a further period of time. I'm not sure exactly what that would be at the moment, but in summary, we would be communicating with residents to let them know that there would be an extension. They wouldn't be uninformed in that regard.
I might just jump in because I discussed this briefly with Director Lee. I was going to make it in my comments, but just depending if this passes and goes to strategy and then that agenda cut-off is missed, this would be an occasion where I would be happy to use urgent business if it's ready in that time as well, and I'd discussed with the council. So there's a range of triggers through which we can address that as well. I just flagged that on the record if we end up there, because I've only done it once before. I'd call elected members and let them know. So that's an option too. Councillor Hutton.
Yeah, and just again, one of the other desired outcomes from this transition was higher compliance. With higher compliance, is there the capacity to actually explore providing residents with additional permits? For example, e-permits at the moment, you get 2 permits, you have to purchase the 3rd one. Would there be the opportunity to explore higher compliance actually leading to the ability to provide more permits? And would that be, or could it be included in this report?
Director.
Thank you, through you, Mr Mayor. There is an established council position at the moment in relation to permits, and there's I suppose there's a gradual reduction in the number of permits available that as I said, that reduces over time. We're currently in an approach where residents that are eligible for permits are able to obtain 2 free and then purchase a third one in a couple of years, and I can't remember off the top of my head exactly when, but that will reduce further to 2 permits. As you mentioned, we do believe we'll achieve a higher level of compliance with e-permits. As to whether or not we'd be able to reconsider that approach that's established by council, I think that would only be able to be done over a period of time. I would be hesitant at this stage, but I'm happy to give some further thought to it. I would be hesitant at this stage to commit to an increase of the number of permits because we believe there will be a greater rate of compliance. There's probably a fair bit of data that we'd like to gather and analyse before we committed to that.
Thank you. I've just got 2 more questions. The second last one, what is the current uptake of e-permits? Obviously keeping in mind that the current sign-up to e-permits is still open to residents.
Director.
Thank you, through you, Mr. Mayor. So there's currently, of the properties that have permits, there's a 47% transition from paper-based to e-permits at the moment. They're accounts that are actively using e-permits. There are potentially others that have created an account but haven't activated it yet because the paper-based permit is still in effect. So as I said, we know there's at least 47% that are actively using it. There may be others that have the account there ready to go but haven't necessarily switched it on, and there would be others that are yet to actually transition across.
Final question, Councillor
My
Hutt.
final question, I knew you'd hold me to that. So in terms of the concerns raised by local residents, what steps has the city currently taken to alleviate some of these concerns? And is the city confident that it will be able to alleviate all these concerns by the current deadline of the 31st of March?
Director.
Thank you, through you, Mr. Mayor. The city is working very hard to address the queries and concerns that we do receive. I don't think there will ever be a situation where we'll be able to address every individual's concern that we receive. It would be lovely, but I don't think that is an outcome we'll ever be able to achieve. In response to Councillor Vinciulo's question earlier, the city is endeavouring to support residents with the transition and the ongoing use of the e-permit system in a number of different ways. So ways that, I guess, providing a suite of different options that allows a resident to engage and interact with us as best that they're able to, or as in the way they're most comfortable with. As I mentioned, I think in addition to the support that we've already provided, the additional measures that we are working on at the moment that I will present to elected members next strategy session in March is another measure of a way of acknowledging the feedback and the concerns that we've received and trying to make the system as accessible as for those that are either not frequent users of technology or necessarily not comfortable users of technology.
You know, if I may just make a brief comment. Just to start off with, I think I've already expressed this to some members of council and administration before, but obviously just before Christmas I was taken by surprise when I had a member of the community, an elderly member of the community, visit me at my workplace to raise concerns with the implementation of the e-permit system. She was gravely concerned about the ability of her carers, who she said numer 4 per day and varying people at different times. The reason I was taken by surprise was that as elected members, we were not fully aware that this transition was taking place. It therefore was very, very difficult in order to provide answers to the many questions that we received over the subsequent weeks. Obviously, there's been a lot of consultation over the last few weeks with administration, a lot of questions, and I do acknowledge Deputy Mayor Councillor Hill for the great work he's done in following lots of them up very diligently. That is obviously why we requested that more information be provided to Council. We've been awaiting patiently for that to happen. Obviously, the upcoming strategy session was the opportunity to do so. It's therefore obviously a difficult situation to be moving a motion on something of which we do not yet have all of the information. Having said that, I do think this motion provides a stopgap, and that stopgap is effectively that there are, in my opinion, some valid concerns that have been raised about the transition of the system. And until we as councillors are confident that those concerns have been addressed, I don't think we can proceed with the system as is. Obviously the cost, $110,000 of potential savings for ratepayers is significant. When you break it down per household, it's about $43 per household. I'm keen to explore how we may get some of the benefits from this system, but do so in a way that doesn't negatively disadvantage some of our most vulnerable members of our community. I am open-minded. I'm obviously not fixed either onto setting a specific transitionary timeline. I just think all options should be explored. And I have obviously particularly received concerns with residents about the number of permits they receive.
Thank you, Councillor Hutton. Time has expired.
Oh, thank you.
Thank you. Council, I will just draw your attention to clause 1.3 of meeting procedures, which is a more efficient and effective use of time at meetings. Happy to throw it open to councillors for comments, but I do encourage you probably back off on the questions. We will ventilate this at length next Tuesday, no matter what we decide here, and it will come back to next month. So I think Director Lee's doing a valiant job of answering them, but I do encourage you to confine your contribution to comments at this point, and we'll have a full opportunity in 1 week's time to question this at length. Councillor Pizzi.
I just wanted to comment to applaud the city for establishing parking permit for carers, and I would encourage them to extend that, as you suggested, to independent carers. With a lot of nurses and carers do work under their ABN and look after the residents in the city of Joondalup, so it would be beneficial for them to have access as well. I did have one question, and it's a very quick one, if allowed.
I do have to allow questions, but I'm just pointing out part of our objective is the efficient use of time.
Yeah.
Councillor Pizzi.
How many residents have vocalised a concern to the city for the system?
Director Lee.
Thank you, through you, Mr. Mayor. I'd have to take the question on notice because I don't have the specific number with me. But I couldn't even provide an estimate. More than 20, but I'm not too sure. I'd have to take the question on notice.
Yes. Thank you, Councillor Kingston.
Thank you. A very short comment. I'm happy with supporting Councillor O'Neill on this. I think it's important people don't get left behind with the change in the process. There's a lot of change that happens in the society, so I think managing it is one of the things we just got to focus on. As far as the report, whether it comes to the next council meeting, I'm fine if it even comes to April, and then there's just a 1 month extension till the council decides, or later. To me, a lot of the questions tonight seem to be front-loading, asking for information when the report is to ask for information to get more understanding of it, and then we've also got the strategy session in March. So I'm happy to proceed with what Councillor O'Neill's put up, and I think he's done well, putting forward his reasons and representing the residents. I don't represent an area where there are e-permits or parking permits which occur in. So for me, there's been a bit of a distance. I understand the North Ward councillors have had quite a bit of discussion with the administration and knew about the agenda of the strategy session beforehand, but this is something that's new to me, that a number of this is all occurring. So I think we've just got to understand what the concerns for the residents are, take them seriously and respond. So I think this is a good approach, and I think we've got to make a decision in the coming months to deal with this, given that the cut-off date currently is going to be the 31st of March. So I think Councillor O'Neill is correct to bring this to this council meeting, not the next one. So there's the opportunity to be fully informed about what judgments we'll make. So thank you.
The point of order.
Yes.
Just around the assertion that it's a surprise to councillors that this was coming to the next strategy session when it was discussed at the previous strategy session that it would be coming to the next strategy session. I feel like that's an adverse reflection.
I'll hand it to Councillor Kingston if he wishes to withdraw.
Can I make a personal explanation?
Yes.
Yes. The full comment I was making was a surprise around the general concerns around this. This is not some adverse reflection to say, well, being surprised. So I apologise and withdraw if Councillor Hutton has taken it that way. But as I said earlier, I don't represent areas which have permits. So a lot of these issues are things which I've not had long engagements with the administration about. That's why I've said what I said.
Thank you.
I think that's straightforward.
Thank you, Councillor Kingston. Thank you. Are you? Yep.
I'll just make a point of personal explanation, if I may. I'm happy to accept the withdrawal. However, my point of order was situated around the accusation that it was somehow a surprise, as if it had been a secret discussion.
Yeah,
for the record, at the last strategy session, it was requested and it was discussed in detail that this would be coming to the next strategy session. Councillor Hill and I have waited for that report to come before taking steps. So the accusation that other councillors have been working more diligently on this than others, I think, is not correct. And we've followed the process and the procedure, and we were of the opinion that the next council meeting might have been the most appropriate time to bring forward the notice of motion, given we didn't yet have the right information. So I just make that as a point of clarification, but we are still in support of I'm still in support of this notice of motion, even though that information I've now provided.
Thank you, Councillor Hutton. I mean, under the meeting procedures, and I've given Councillor Kingston a chance to withdraw if that inference was taken and apologise, which he has done, so that meets the requirement of the meeting procedures in my view. I also actually threw it to him to clarify, and I'm satisfied with his clarification, which is, as I understood it, because remember we're just phrasing these things verbally, as I understood it, he was saying that the extent of the issue has come as a surprise to him, more so than the fact that it was coming up on the strategy session agenda, which is how he's explained it further, and I'm satisfied with that explanation as well. But satisfied with your personal explanation on that also. Thank you. Further comments on the motion, councillors? Councillor O'Neill, do you wish to close?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Just very briefly. Look, this is all just about doing what's right for our ratepayers and residents. It is clear that there's some bugs and there's some things that are being worked on with the city. They are working diligently to solve all this, but until we actually do know that, this is just in place here to ensure that our ratepayers, our vulnerable residents, can actually use a system that they're used to, and they can be guided to eventually transition over to another system. This is just, the timing, whatever it is, but it does need to be obviously discussed, and this allows us to hash this out at a later stage, as the Mayor did point out. I commend the city that the carer permits, although I believe not in place yet, is being developed. So there's all these new things that are coming, but until we've got all this ironed out, I do believe that this is the best way moving forward, so I encourage you all to support it and support our ratepayers.
Thank you. I'll put that motion and ask you to cast your votes. Declare the voting closed and the motion is carried. Next item of business is notice of motion number 2. Councillor Fishwick.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'd like to move my motion, which was contained in the addendum agenda.
Thank you, Councillor. Seconded, Councillor O'Neill. Councillor Fishwick.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. To save time, I won't speak about my rationale which was contained in the addendum agenda, but I'd just like to add that, survise that the current petition protocol was considered by a strategy session on the 30th November 2021, where it was generally agreed that a 12-month trial would be conducted in 2022 to assess its effectiveness. It was also acknowledged that a future strategy session would revisit the matter to determine whether amendments to the meeting procedures local law were necessary. However, with the state government's review of the Local Government Act and its regulations, which will require all local governments to adopt a standard meeting procedures local law, most likely I expect in October this year, therefore amending our existing local law is virtually fruitless, and it's not recommended at this stage because it would probably be not approved by the Joint Standing Committee on Delegated Legislation. At the 2021 strategy session, the Director of Governance and Strategy advised that while the petition protocol could be endorsed by Council, any amendments would need to be formally presented for consideration. As strategy sessions are not decision-making forums, the petition protocol has not been formally endorsed by the Council, leaving its status unclear. So in light of the recent developments, and particularly acceptance of e-petitions, it's timely to review the protocol to ensure it aligns with contemporary practices and community expectations. Furthermore, the experience of the Megiddo Way footpath petition highlights the need for a clear and structured process, thus ensuring petitions are considered by Council, preferably before works are undertaken, but notwithstanding if there is Council's made a determination on a project and legal agreements and contracts have been duly executed. A review of the protocol would reinforce the principles of transparency and inclusiveness in the decision-making process. For these reasons, I seek your support for my notice of motion requesting the CEO to prepare a report reviewing the petition protocol. This would then provide Council with the opportunity to assess its effectiveness and formally endorse any necessary amendments. So I'd ask you to support my notice of motion. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Fishwick. Councillor O'Neill.
Reserve my right, thank you.
Thank you. Further comments? If no comments, I'll put that motion and ask you to cast your votes. Thank you. Declare the voting closed and the items carried unanimously. Council, that brings us to the confidential items, and I'm proposing a procedural motion that Council, in accordance with Section 5.232B of the Local Government Act 1995 and Clause 5.22 of the City's Meeting Procedures Local Law 2013, resolves to close the meeting to members of the public to consider the following items, being item 12.4, being the Walk of Fame, item 12.6, status of legal actions report, and item 12.23, the electricity supply agreement, contestable sites, and 2, permits the following employees to remain in the chamber during discussion. There's an extra one to add on there, governance team. Oh no, it's in there at 2.8. Then I have a different list. Hold on, Mr. CEO, because this has jumped around a bit. I'm down to 2.12 and that's 2.11, so who's different? Mr. Ryan Furtz is not. There we go. That's good. Thank you. Them being the Chief Executive Officer, Mr. James Pearson, the Director of Corporate Services, Matt Humphrey, Director of Governance and Strategy, Jamie Parry, Director of Planning and Community Development, Chris Lee, Director of Infrastructure Services, Nico Klassen, Manager of Strategic and Organisational Development, Rebecca Macario, Manager of Governance, Kylie Bergman, Coordinator of Governance, Vivian Stampolea, Governance Officer, Deborah Guges, Manager of Communications and Stakeholder Relations, Hannah Tagore, and the Manager of Economic Development, Luke Wilcock. So proposed. Do I have a seconder? Seconded, Deputy Mayor. By a show of hands, those in favour? Declare that carried unanimously. Thank you. Please close the doors. Thank you. Deputy Mayor by show of hands. Those in favour? Those against? Declare that carried. Thank you. Item 17, announcements of notices of motion for the next meeting. Are there any notices of motion for the next meeting? If not, that concludes. Councillor Fishwick, my apologies.
In relation to matters raised at the briefing session to be noted in the council addendum agenda or the full agenda, so we don't have to, so we have a full trail of what transpired at the meeting. Thank you.
So you'll craft a notice of motion to that effect. Thank you, Councillor Fishwick. Further notice of motion? If not, then that concludes tonight's meeting, and I hereby close the meeting at 9:32 p.m. Thank you.